y'all, this is Jeanette Keynes from Jewelry Arts Inc. In this video, I'm going to show you how to solder something to a backsheet where we have only just exactly enough and no extra. I'm sure that's a scenario that's never happened to anybody else, but it did happen to us in the studio. So I want to show you guys a really common scenario that we have in the studio that we of course think that we're the only ones that have that scenario, but actually we all have this kind of thing. So Susie she's making this beautiful pendant with twisted wire and a bezel, and we're gonna do little clusters of granules, and that's all good. And we were talking about, we need a little heavier back sheet to be thick enough to sustain it, right? Now, of course, in magical land, we all have gallons and gallons and gallons of prepared sheet just waiting to be cut to the exact right size. In reality, what we have is we have one piece that is big enough, but has this cut right here. So we were looking at it and I said, we've got just enough room, but we have to just be very sure that we don't end up accidentally scooching over. So we're not doing anything actually all that tricky, but all we're gonna do is I'm gonna solder this first wire down closest to this little cut with a couple pieces of solder to be absolutely certain that it hasn't slid too far. Because normally, you know, with something like this, we just put it up on a tripod, solder, you know, we're going crazy. And if it moves by a hair, it's not a huge deal. In this case, it is a huge deal if it moves. So we're gonna do it right here, solder a couple pieces so that it can't go anywhere, and then we're just gonna treat the rest of the piece, you know what I mean, like we normally would. It's no big deal a lot of times to work with what you've got, but you just have to like keep that in mind as you go, because sometimes it's very easy to get distracted later on, you know what I mean? And like, oh, I'm just focusing on this or I'm focusing on that, and then forget what's actually important. So we were just debating whether to use a really big tip like the 1 or the 0. High karat gold does take a lot of heat, so generally I would always prefer to go with the bigger tip and just, you know, pull back a little bit if, you know, like we're not, if needed, exactly. And like I said, a lot of times stuff like this, we're just gonna heat from underneath on a trivet, you know, or a tripod, but we're doing it on here because I wanna be very certain this doesn't move. So all I did was I put a couple pieces of solder. I'm not gonna really worry about the whole thing at once. I'm just putting a couple pieces over here by this corner so that they flow, they hold it in place, and then I can just move on with my life, okay? I'm full of something. I'm definitively full of something. All right. So we're gonna go ahead and solder it down. Like I said, nothing about this is really all that exotic. It's just, you know, sometimes you have certain parameters you have to work within. And I usually tell people very few solutions are really that problematic. It's just keeping your eye on it, okay? So I'm just gonna work my little section here, because you know that whole thing about heating the whole piece is a waste of fucking time. See that? And that. Because I mean, you notice like I'm keeping my heat more on the back sheet. And I'm gonna poke that little ball a little bit, because you know they like to wiggle around. You see that? Flows in there beautifully. Now that corner is now held down. I can just do the rest of it up on a tripod or however I want to do it, and I can just relax because I know that that can't shift around. So that's really what it's all about, is just make sure you take care of your shit right up front and don't put it off till later when you know, you're up on the tripod and it moves and you've forgotten that you're worried about it, and you know what I mean, et cetera, et cetera. So that's all it is just make sure. And now we can make really good use of the sheet exactly the way we need it, and by the time it's all trimmed and beautiful, no one will ever know that we had, you know, a little scenario to deal with.